The laughter started near the East Bar, where a group of men in evening wear had been drinking since 7, and it moved through the room the way laughter at someone else's expense always moves, quickly, without resistance, gathering people into it before they have quite decided whether they want to be gathered. That is the specific cruelty of that kind of laughter. It does not require intention. It only requires a room full of people who share an assumption, and one person who does not fit it, and the gap between the two is wide enough for amusement to fall into. The woman at the center of it was standing beside the catering station near the service entrance, stacking used glasses onto a tray with the unhurried efficiency of someone who has been doing this particular kind of work for a long time. She was 63. She was wearing a blue dress that was clean and pressed, and had been bought for an occasion some years ago, and was still, by any honest measure, perfectly adequate. Her hair was pinned. Her shoes were flat. She had the hands of a woman who has spent decades doing physical work, not hidden, not apologized for, simply present, the way honest things are present. She had, approximately 40 minutes earlier, noticed that one of the catering staff was struggling with a tray too large for her, and had simply taken half of it without being asked. Because that was what you did when you saw someone struggling. Because that was the kind of woman she had always been. And she had not fully registered that, in this room, in this light, among these people, the gesture would be read as evidence of employment rather than character. She had registered it now. It had begun small, as these things begin. A raised eyebrow from a woman near the centerpiece arrangements. A murmured exchange between two guests near the window. The quiet, self-satisfied laughter of people who have found something they can agree on without effort, which is always, in any room, the discovery of someone who does not appear to belong in it. The tray had been the signal. The flat shoes had confirmed it. The unpinned strand of hair had sealed it. By the time the laughter from the East Bar reached the catering station, a small but sufficient portion of 300 people had decided what they were looking at. And what they were looking at amused them. "Darling," said the woman in the ivory gown, to no one in particular, and everyone in general, in the way that people speak when they want witnesses without wanting accountability. "I think the help is having a moment of confusion." She lifted her champagne. She smiled at the couple to her left, with the bright, inclusive smile of a woman inviting others into a joke she has already decided is harmless. Someone ought to tell her the shift ends at 10. The laughter gathered. It was not vicious laughter. That was almost the worst thing about it. It was entirely casual. The laughter of people who found the situation mildly diverting rather than cruel, who would have been genuinely puzzled to be told it was either. It was the laughter of a room that had made an assumption so automatic it did not register as an assumption at all. The woman in the blue dress set the tray down with a care that was not hurry, and looked at the woman in the ivory gown with an expression that was not shame. It was patience, a very specific, very old patience, the kind that has been practiced so long it no longer costs anything to produce. The patience of a woman who has spent 63 years in a world that regularly misread her and had decided, at some point too far back to locate precisely, that the misreading said more about the world than it did about her. The kind of patience that the people laughing in that room had never been required to develop, and so had no vocabulary for, and so mistook, as people always mistake the things they haven't needed, for absence of understanding. Eleanor Voss understood perfectly. She had simply been in enough rooms in her life to know that the ones worth staying in were not always the ones that wanted you there, and she had been asked specifically by the person who had built this one to be here tonight. She intended to stay. She reached for the tray again. The Voss Group's annual gala had been held for 11 years in the ballroom of the Renwick, a hotel that occupied the ground and first floors of a building Marcus Voss had bought at 34, and restored at 37, and opened at 39, with the particular satisfaction of a man who has taken something broken and returned it to its best use. The ballroom had the proportions of a room that had been designed to make people feel, upon entering it, that the ordinary world was smaller than they had remembered, and that the life available to them inside this space was larger. It did this reliably. 300 people were inside it tonight, in evening wear, with champagne, in the full knowledge that the man who owned the building they were standing in had built his company from nothing at an age when most of his peers were still asking their fathers for advice. Marcus Voss was 41. He was tall in the way that men who grew up doing physical work are tall, not architecturally, but functionally, as though the height had been grown in service of something. He had his mother's jawline and his mother's eyes and, though he would not have said so himself, his mother's specific quality of attention. The ability to be fully present in a room while simultaneously observing it, as though occupying two positions at once, the one inside the experience and the one watching it with care. He was standing near the north windows, with his glass untouched, and his attention on the east side of the room, where he had been watching the laughter build for the past 3 minutes, when Serena appeared at his elbow. "I think your mother may be causing a small scene," Serena said. She said it lightly, with the practiced neutrality of a woman who has spent considerable effort ensuring that her lightest statements carry the most weight. She was 36 and had been in Marcus's life for 2 years, and in his building for 1, since she had moved into the penthouse with the ease of a woman who had been moving into places she intended to stay for exactly as long as suited her. She had the beauty of a woman who knew precisely what she was doing with it, and she used it with the accuracy of a person who has identified it as a professional tool and maintains it accordingly. "She's not causing anything," Marcus said. "She's cleared 4 tables in the last 20 minutes, Serena said. "People are laughing, Marcus. This is not what I arranged this evening to be." "What did you arrange it to be?" Serena looked at him with the expression she reserved for moments when she believed she was being more patient than the situation required. "I arranged it to be the most significant event in the Voss Group's calendar," she said. "I arranged it to be the evening that the people in this room remember when they think about your company's future. I did not arrange it to be the evening that everyone remembers because your mother decided to do the catering." "She isn't doing the catering," Marcus said. "She's holding a tray. She saw someone struggling." "I don't care why she's holding a tray, Marcus. I care that 300 people in this room do not know who she is. And that means 300 people in this room have just watched the owner of the Voss Group's mother being laughed at as domestic help, and no one has said a word." Marcus looked at his mother across the room. He watched the woman in the ivory gown say something else, and the small satellite of laughter that gathered and dispersed. He watched his mother's expression, which he could read from 30 feet away because he had been reading it his whole life, the patience, the steadiness, the complete absence of the thing the laughing people were looking for. He felt something shift in him that had been shifting for a long time, something that had been moving slowly, in the way of things that had been quietly wrong for long enough to feel almost ordinary, and had now reached the point where it was going to become visible, whether he was ready for it or not. "I know," he said. "Then go and get her," Serena said. "Bring her to the suite. She can wait there until the formal part is done, and then we'll introduce her properly, quietly, to the people who matter." "Quietly," Marcus said. "Yes, introduce her quietly, to the people who matter." Serena heard something in the repetition. She looked at him. "You've been asking me to keep her quiet for 2 years, Marcus said. "You called her the cleaner. The first time you met her to her face, you called her the cleaner. She has a name. I know her name. You've never used it." He set his glass down on the nearest surface. He straightened his jacket. "Her name is Eleanor. She was born in a 2-room flat in Whitmore Street. She cleaned offices for 22 years so that I could go to university, because the scholarship I won covered the tuition and nothing else. And she worked nights and weekends and every summer, and she never once, not once, made me feel that the cost was something I owed her. He looked at Serena steadily. You want me to go and put her in a suite? Serena was quiet for a moment. She had the expression of a woman recalibrating. She did so quickly and without visible distress, which was one of the things he had once found impressive about her. Marcus, she said. This is not the moment. No, he said. You're right. It isn't. He crossed the room. He moved through the gala, the way he moved through rooms where he was known, acknowledged on all sides, unhurried, not stopping. 3 people reached for him as he passed, and found him already beyond reach. The room opened slightly in front of him, the way rooms open for people who built them. He was at the catering station in 40 seconds. His mother looked up when she heard him coming, because she had always heard him coming, in the way of mothers who have spent years listening for a particular footstep in the dark. Marcus, she said. Her voice was exactly what it always was. The room had not changed it. Mum, he said. He looked at her. The blue dress, the flat shoes, the pinned hair, the tray with the glasses she had just stacked. He looked at her hands, which he knew better than any other hands in the world, the specific map of work that 22 years had made in them. He looked at her face, which had the expression it always had when she was in a room with him, and was making sure he didn't know she was watching him, making sure he was all right. She was watching him now, making sure he was all right. He felt something open in his chest that had been closed for 2 years. Not a small thing, the kind of opening that reminds you that the thing had been closed at all. Come with me, he said. I was just going to finish. Leave it, he said. Come with me. I need you next to me. She looked at him. She set the tray down. She looked at his face with the attention of a woman reading something that is not quite distress and not quite relief, and is very specifically her son. The way he looked the night he got his exam results, and the night he signed the papers for the first building, and the night his father left, which were all, in their different ways, the same face. The face of a man at the edge of something that is either a fall or a step forward, and doesn't yet know which. All right, she said. She straightened her dress. She lifted her chin. She took his arm. She had always had this quality, Eleanor Voss, this ability to walk into the next thing with the posture of a woman who had decided that whatever was coming was going to find her standing straight. She had walked into rooms all her life that had not been built for her, that had been assembled by people who assumed she would use the service entrance. And she had walked through the front door every time, not with defiance, but with the simpler conviction that she had as much right to be there as anyone. She walked into the center of the Renwick ballroom on her son's arm. The room did not immediately notice them. Rooms of 300 people have their own momentum, their own sustained noise, their own complete absorption in themselves. It took perhaps 30 seconds before the nearest cluster of guests registered Marcus moving toward the low stage at the north end of the room, and another 30 before the ripple of attention reached the people at the east bar, and another 20 before the woman in the ivory gown looked up from her champagne and found herself looking at the woman in the blue dress standing on the stage next to the man whose company owned the hotel they were standing in. Marcus did not take a microphone. He didn't need one. The room had already begun its own quieting, the way rooms quiet when they sense that something is about to happen that will be worth remembering. He looked out at 300 people. He looked at the woman in the ivory gown. He looked at Serena, who had followed him across the room and was standing at the edge of the stage, with the expression of a woman watching a situation she had designed produce a result she had not intended, which was the specific expression she would be wearing for the rest of this particular chapter of her life. He looked at his mother. He looked at the room again. "Most of you know what the Voss Group is," he said. "You know the properties. You know the portfolio. You know the number I started with and the number it's grown to, because it's on the materials Serena had printed for this evening, and it's a number I'm proud of." He paused. "You don't know where it came from. The actual where. The first where. Before the first building. Before the first investor meeting. Before any of it. I've never told that part of the story at one of these evenings, because for 2 years I let someone I trusted persuade me that the story of how this company began was not the kind of story that belonged in a room like this. The room was completely quiet. That was a failure of judgment, he said. Mine, not anyone else's. Mine. He half turned toward his mother. Eleanor Voss was standing at his side, with her hands folded and her chin level, and her expression the same as it always was, composed, attentive, present. She was watching him with the look she had given him his whole life when he was doing something she was proud of, but wasn't going to say so until afterward, because that was the kind of mother she was. "Her name is Eleanor Voss," Marcus said. "She is 63 years old. She was born in a 2-room flat on Whitmore Street, and she has never lived anywhere with more than 3 rooms, not because she couldn't, but because she has never measured a home by its size. She raised me alone from the time I was 11. She cleaned offices, commercial properties, many of them not unlike the ones I now own, for 22 years. She worked nights. She worked weekends. She worked Christmas and Easter and every school holiday when other families were somewhere else. She did this because a scholarship covered my tuition and nothing else, and she was not going to let nothing else be the reason I stopped." He stopped. The room did not move. "This building," he said, "the Renwick, and every property the Voss Group owns, 19 buildings in 7 cities. You've been in them. You've had meetings in them. You've had these dinners in them. You know the name on the door." He paused. "The Voss Group. Her name. It has always been her name. Every building I have ever bought or built or restored carries her name on the front of it. And for 2 years I have stood in rooms full of people who know that name and have never told them whose it is." His voice was doing something it did not often do. He was aware of it. He continued anyway. "Some of you laughed at her tonight," he said. "Not because you are bad people. Because you didn't know. Because I didn't tell you. Because I allowed a situation to exist in which the woman who is the reason this company exists at all could stand in the room that bears her name and be mistaken for the help and laughed at. And no one said a word." He looked at the East Bar, then at the ivory gown, then at the floor for one moment, then at her. He could not finish the last sentence. The words were there. He had formed them, had known exactly what they were, and he could not deliver them, because something had occurred in the region of his chest that was making the ordinary mechanics of speech temporarily unavailable. He stood on the stage in front of 300 people, and he could not speak, and rather than turn away from it, rather than recover and continue, he took his mother's hand in both of his and held it. The room was silent. The silence had the quality of 300 people understanding something at the same moment. Eleanor Voss looked at her son's face. She looked at it with the look she had given him the night of the exam results and the night of the first building and the night his father left, which were all the same face, and which she loved in all its versions. She squeezed his hand once. "Go on," she said quietly, not into the microphone, directly to him. "Finish it." He nodded. He looked up. "I am announcing tonight," he said, "the Eleanor Voss Community Scholarship. Fully funded university places for children of building services workers, cleaners, maintenance staff, catering, security, administered through the Voss Group Foundation, named for my mother, because the scholarship that changed my life was given to the son of a cleaner, and I want every child of every person who does the work that makes buildings like this one function to have the same chance I had." He paused. "The details are on the tables. The first cohort begins in September." He looked at his mother. "Thank you," he said. It was the simplest sentence in the room, and the heaviest. "For everything you did when I wasn't watching. For the nights I didn't know about. For the years I took without understanding what they cost." He stopped. "I'm sorry it took me so long." Eleanor Voss had prepared, for most of her life, for the possibility that certain rooms would never fully receive her. She had developed, through long practice, the ability to remain unchanged by that fact, to carry herself with the same posture and the same economy of movement and the same unhurried attention to whatever task was in front of her, regardless of whether the room wanted her there or not. She had not expected to need a different preparation for the opposite possibility, for the possibility of being received completely, publicly, in a room of 300 people who had just understood something. She was composed through most of it. She was composed when the applause began, and when it continued past the point where applause usually ends, and when it became the specific kind that happens when people are not just appreciating something, but correcting something, trying in the only way available to them to put right what the evening had done wrong in its first hour. She was composed when Marcus held her hand, and when he looked at her with a look she knew. She was almost composed when the woman in the ivory gown crossed the room toward her. The woman's champagne was gone. Her expression had undergone a considerable journey in the past 4 minutes, and had arrived, visibly, somewhere that looked like genuine distress. Not the performed distress of a woman managing optics, but the actual distress of a person who has just understood what she did and to whom she did it. "Mrs. Voss," she said. She said it quietly, which was different from how she had said everything else in the preceding hour. She stopped. Started again. "I don't have a word for what I am." Eleanor looked at her. She looked at her the way she had looked at a great many people in a great many rooms, with full attention, without judgment, with the particular even-handedness of a woman who has spent enough time being on the wrong end of assumptions to have strong views about what grace looks like from that position. "Try sorry," Eleanor said. "It's usually enough to start with." The woman said it. She meant it. Eleanor accepted it in the manner in which she accepted most things, cleanly, without ceremony, without storing it for later. Serena left before the formal portion of the evening ended. She left by the main entrance, which was the entrance she had always used, and the doorman held the door for her, as he always had, and the street received her in the ordinary way of streets that do not distinguish between people on their way up and people on their way out. She had the expression of a woman reorganizing a story, deciding what it would be in the retelling, and she would retell it several ways over the coming months, and none of the versions would be entirely honest, and she already knew this, and was already deciding that it did not matter. What mattered, she had told herself, was what came next. She would find out that what came next was more difficult than she expected, because the room she had spent 2 years constructing, the precise arrangement of who was in it, and what they knew, and what they believed about Marcus Voss's origins, had been disassembled in 4 minutes on a stage in the Renwick Ballroom. And rooms that have been disassembled, that thoroughly do not reassemble around the person who built them the first time. That was not the point of this story, though. She was not the point of this story. She was only the mechanism by which the point arrived. Mrs. Peel, who had managed catering for Voss Group events for 7 years, and who had watched the evening's first hour with the contained alarm of a woman who sees disaster forming and has no authority to prevent it, was restoring order to the service area near the east entrance when Eleanor Voss found her, an hour after the speech. With 2 cups of tea she had made herself in the service kitchen because she knew where everything was kept. "You don't have to do that," Mrs. Peel said. "I know," Eleanor said, handing her a cup. "I wanted to." Mrs. Peel looked at the cup. She looked at Eleanor. She had been in service for 30 years, which meant she had spent 30 years developing the ability to read the difference between wealth that remembered where it came from and wealth that had decided the question was irrelevant. Eleanor Voss, who had not arrived at wealth but had given birth to it and had never confused the two, was entirely legible to her. "The girl on the catering team," Eleanor said. "The one with the heavy tray. Is she all right?" Mrs. Peel blinked. "She's fine. A bit shaken. She didn't realize." "No one did," Eleanor said. "It wasn't her fault. Can you make sure she knows that?" Mrs. Peel said she would. She stood with her tea and watched Eleanor move back through the thinning crowd toward her son with the walk of a woman who has been standing straight in difficult rooms her whole life and has no intention of stopping now, which is, when you see it clearly, not a small thing at all. Marcus found her at the window at the end of the evening, looking out at the city the way she sometimes looked at it when she thought no one was watching, with the expression of a woman cataloging everything she had built toward. Not the buildings, but the thing behind the buildings. The reason the buildings were named what they were named. He stood beside her. He did not say anything for a moment. The city was loud and lit, and entirely indifferent to what had happened inside the Renwick ballroom that evening, which is what cities are. And it was also in the way that the indifferent world becomes, occasionally, briefly, when you are standing next to the right person, exactly the right backdrop for the thing he needed to say. "I should have said it sooner," he said. "Yes," she said. She was not interested in softening this for him. She never had been. It was one of the things he loved most about her and had spent 2 years trying to find a polite way around. "You should have." "I know. You were ashamed of me," she said. Not with accusation. As a fact, stated cleanly, the way she had always stated the things that needed stating. "I was afraid," he said. Which isn't the same thing, but I know it felt the same. She considered this. She had always been fair with him. She turned it over in the way she turned things over, without hurry, without the need to reach a verdict before the question was fully examined. "All right," she said. "Afraid of what?" "That what I'd built wouldn't look like enough if people knew what it started from." He looked at the city. "Which makes no sense. It makes less sense the longer I look at it. It started from everything. It started from the most anyone has ever given me." He paused. "I wanted it to look like I'd done it myself. Because in this world, that's what impresses people. The self-made story. The nothing to something story. And you were in the story, but I was making you invisible in it. And I knew it. And I kept, Marcus," she said. He stopped. "The scholarship is a good thing," she said. "Do that. Do it properly. Make sure the first cohort has everything they need, not just the tuition, the way mine didn't. Make sure there are no gaps that someone has to work nights to fill. I will, and call me on Sundays," she said. "The way you used to. I will." She looked back at the city. He looked at her. In the ballroom behind them, the last of the 300 guests were gathering coats and saying goodbyes, and the catering team was clearing the final tables, and the candles on those tables were burning down toward their last hour, and everything the evening had been was becoming everything the evening would be remembered as. The lights in the ballroom flickered once, a single, brief dimming, as though the building had taken one quiet breath, and every candle on the long tables guttered in unison, bowing toward the same invisible point, and then steadied, and burned brighter than before, and steadied entirely. Eleanor noticed it. She did not remark on it. She had lived long enough and worked in enough buildings to know that old buildings breathe, and that sometimes their breathing coincides with the moments when you most need to feel that something larger than the room is paying attention. She finished her tea. She set the cup down. She straightened her blue dress. "Take me home," she said. "I want to see my street." Marcus offered his arm. She took it. They walked out of the Renwick ballroom through the front entrance, the only entrance, the one that had always been hers as much as anyone's, and into the city, and the door closed behind them on an evening that 300 people would spend the rest of their lives telling differently, each one quietly adjusting the part where they laughed, or did not stop the laughing, or stood at the East Bar with a glass and did not say a word. The Eleanor Voss Community Scholarship sent its first cohort to university the following September. 11 students, children of cleaners, security staff, maintenance workers, kitchen hands, children whose parents had spent decades in buildings that bore other people's names, making those buildings function, making them presentable, making them the kind of places where galas could be held, and glasses could gleam, and floors could be walked on without thought by people in evening wear. The scholarship's founding document contained one line from Eleanor herself, which Marcus had asked her to write, and which she had written in 2 minutes on a Tuesday morning at her kitchen table in her 3-room flat on Whitmore Street. The work that is least seen is not the least important. It is simply the work done by people who were never given a room in which to be noticed. There is a room now. It has her name on the door. Several of them do. The most important one was always the building itself, the Voss Group, in 7 cities, on every door, which had her name on it before any of the rest, before the scholarship and the foundation and the speech, and the evening that everyone in that room restructured in their own memory, until it became the story of the night. They understood something they should have understood sooner. Some things take time to be seen. Some things are seen in the first moment, and then looked away from, and then seen again, properly, finally, at the cost of some shame, when someone arrives in the right room, at the right moment, and says the name out loud, and does not allow the room to unhear it. A name spoken clearly in a full room is the beginning of everything. A name that has been on the door all along, waiting for someone to read it as it was meant to be read, as a dedication, a debt, a love made permanent in glass and stone, is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the whole story.